Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alexis with Recruiting Daily. Long time no talk to, people. Thanks for joining us. You're here today to learn about metrics, KPIs, and measurements. Oh my! So, without further ado, let's move on. We're going to thank our sponsors for today. Shout out to Glassdoor, Clear Company, and HireClicks. You can see there's a little bit of information about our lovely sponsors here, so please make sure you go check them out on all the social media platforms. Go to their websites, do the demos. We really appreciate them helping us get this accomplished today. A little bit of housekeeping. As always, you're in listen-only mode, so you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. We are recording this. Ooh, I jumped the gun. We're recording this, but you'll get a copy of it within 24 hours, and it'll be up on our website for your viewing pleasure as well. Please also feel free to ask questions and raise your hand throughout the broadcast. You can see that you can do that on your control panel. Myself and a couple other of my friendly elves will be behind the scenes monitoring questions, so we'll be sure to get those answered for you. If you don't hear your question be answered throughout the broadcast, don't worry. We will get it to our presenter and to our sponsor, so someone will be reaching out to make sure that we get you all the information you need. Follow along online using the hashtag #OurDaily, and stay tuned for more information coming up as well later on regarding another webinar that we're going to have this Thursday. And with that, I'm going to throw it to today's expert, Martin Burns, and he's going to take it from here and get you guys all educated on metrics today. Here we go. Hi, Martin.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Alexis. I always think when these webinar intros happen that it's almost like you're boarding an airplane, and just ever remember, this is how you buckle a seatbelt. Necessary introductions and kind of walkthroughs. I appreciate that, and thanks everyone for joining us. It's metrics. It's super exciting, and I'm only being a little sarcastic there. I actually think metrics are interesting and really useful, but maybe a bit about me. And I'll keep this short again with the webinar thing where you have the presenter who talks for half an hour about their own background and gives you no content. It's kind of frustrating. So I'll keep this concise for you. But my general background, I am not Troy McClure, but I love that character for some reason. And if you're of a certain generation, he'll resonate. Hopefully most of you recognize who he is. My real job, though, is as VP of Strategy Consulting for HireClicks. And my role involves helping really interesting companies out with fairly complex problems around recruitment and advising them on solutions and strategies. And I come to that background with a career as primarily a practitioner. I kind of grew up in the industry as an agency recruiter and then went into corporate, built and ran corporate recruiting teams and organizations, built brands, built metrics, implemented software, begged finance for money for software, used metrics along the way. And prior to recruitment, I also did a short stint growing up in publishing where I was in sales for a few years. And that's where I first learned about measuring your activities to get toward profitability and delivering results, and why that can help with prediction. It's a useful tool. So kind of get into it back then. And then kind of progressing there into recruitment. And then finally now I'm at my seat HireClicks talking to all of you lovely people about metrics. So let's, if we could, Alexis, just jump forward a little bit. That's enough about me. So it's interesting when Recruiting Daily reached out to me to do this webinar, they said, we really think the theme should be, the one metric. What's the one metric everyone needs? And I thought about it. And I thought, well, to me, it seemed like a fairly obvious answer, but I wanted to test it. So I started talking to people who I know in the industry, who I respect a lot, including folks I work with here at HireClicks, as well as others externally, about what they thought the one most important metric was, just to see if it was consistent. And it was not. What I started noticing was it really depended on what the person's role was, where they viewed the world from, kind of their lens. And I also got responses along the lines of, leave me alone. I hate metrics. I wish my boss would stop measuring me. I'm a sorcerer. I know what I'm doing. I can figure this out. I know the art of it. It's art. It's not science. I don't need to measure it. Stop making me report things. That was actually fairly consistent across a lot of responses, which I found interesting and frankly not shocking. I've heard it before, and I understand it. It's frustrating to be tracking your activity on a regular basis if you don't have the right tools, and a lot of people don't, or the tools aren't tracking properly. That all these things make sense, but also I think because there's an urge among recruiters, and I'm guilty of it too, to just jump out there and get moving and sort of run and gun and not worry about tracking. So I want to talk a bit about why metrics can help those people, but also talk a bit about why my theory around why every single person I talked to gave me a different answer, and I think it comes down to their lens. But I think it's important to recognize that there's different variations of metrics. But I do think that there's one that you can talk about that is significant that may help with the rest of it. So, Alexis, if you don't mind jumping forward one slide, great. So this is my excuse me, I was timing myself there, and the beeper went off. I apologize for that noise. This is sort of my spiel to you as far as why metrics make sense, and it's something that I was taught myself back in the day. So the first thing is a quote from an old CFO I knew way back, and I was talking about how to make a business case, and he said, "Speak in metrics. It's the language of business," and that really is true. If you think about it, you've got purchasing, right? Who if you want to buy a tool from, you have to go approach them. And the minute you say sourcing, they're thinking about something totally different. And the conversation goes into two directions. You're talking about a sourcing tool. They're thinking about sourcing products and while there's resources, and while it's similar, it's different. And as you're talking to them, explaining what sourcing is, how wonderful it is, how much you love it, and they're thinking about, yeah, I like sourcing too. They're thinking of a different thing ultimately. And so when you finally wrap up and say, and that's why I need Intello, they go, well, no, I don't know. Why would I pay for that? So it's challenging to really tell that story, yeah, and speak in one language, right? You want to use data to tell the story. You want to speak to them in a way that makes sense, and if you can show them via numbers that you've been tracking, and via data that's based on those numbers, and via a nice pretty spreadsheet and all that kind of fun stuff, but it's backed up by real data that you really can explain to them. That's a language they can speak in, and they can speak back to you, and they can say, well, listen, I'm based on this, and I'm judged on these activities. If I don't do this and save this, then this happens here. So you can start finding common ground, but it's all about speaking in a common language. The next piece is that you can get lost in metrics. I mean, you can spend too much time in them. There are so many measurements out there, and we'll get there in a couple minutes. So that's why to put a caveat in there that while it's wonderful to understand how to measure your activities, if you're measuring everything, it can get overwhelming. If we could jump to the next slide, Alexis. So Grandpa Simpson, not to talk about the character, but this is what I'm talking about when it comes to language, right? And metrics. This character is insisting, I want to speak in my language only. I'm going to measure things the way I want to measure them, and it's not going to be common. It's going to be the way I do things. It's my own idiosyncratic way, and leave me alone. Stop measuring me. I'll measure the way I like it. Not saying that my friends who I spoke to about metrics, who responded in this way, were Grandpa Simpsons, but there definitely was a bit of leave me alone, stop measuring me. I do things the way I do them, and here's how I do them. And as they're explaining how they did things, how they measured themselves in their own activity, it was very, very customized. And the issue there, and I'll say it again, if you're speaking in a custom language, the person you're talking to may not understand you, and so you may be speaking a variant of English. But if they're speaking a different variant and there's enough of a heavy accent in both directions, the communication goes sideways very, very rapidly. So the important thing is to make sure that when you're talking to somebody and communicating in metrics, that there's a common language, that you understand each other, and that you're going to be speaking in a fairly data-driven way. That's really helpful. And yes, so here's, by the way, happy Valentine's Day. I was, and I know it's a word cloud, and those are passé nowadays. But that said, I was looking for a way to display how many metrics there are in the industry. So I Googled recruiting metrics just to get a sense and start coming up with what was out there. I stopped at 50 because I couldn't take it anymore. I mean, it was amazing. In fact, there's a Wikipedia page for recruiting metrics, and I know you're all going there right now. I probably should have said that because you're leaving the webinar, but if you haven't gone there yet, just check out sometime. I don't know who put it up. My gut is it was ERE. but I'm not sure. But it's actually there's a significant number of them just in that page alone. And so going through kind of the metrics, the various ways of measuring, the language, it just occurred to me that that our language of describing metrics is itself babble. There's just too much out there, and I keep hammering that home, but I really mean that you could spend all your entire life in metrics, and we don't want to do that. So there's obviously, you see some of what's popping out here is time to fill, time to hire, cost per hire, the selection ratio, first year attrition. There was a recruiting resources cost to acquire. That was one of my favorites. It just seemed, and it was, as I was looking at them all, they all seemed, even the last one, recruiting costs to acquire, they all seemed reasonable. They all seemed like, yeah, I can see why you would use that in this spot. And having been a leader, having run recruitment at a pretty high level, I can see measuring all those in the jobs I've had. On the flip side, I also realized if I started doing that, I would spend my entire life measuring, tracking, measuring, and never speaking, never taking action. So it's just this massive of potential out there. So in this babble, though, we want to figure out how do we actually get to what's important, and that's sort of where I came to after being asked. This is my long way of saying, when they asked me to do one metric for this webinar, I thought, well, I can think of one. What else is out there? Oh my God! So part of this webinar is just a caveat. Don't drown yourself in the data. Get what you need and stay focused on it. And here's how I think you can achieve that. So we're jumping ahead. So I'm actually, okay, let's stay here for a couple minutes. Thing one, thing two. So I think there are really not one main metric that rules that's all you have to worry about. There's really two kind of core metrics that you think about, and then within the metrics there's, well, we'll go there in a minute. So the first metric that I look at is how do I actually succeed in my job, right? How do I actually do what I'm supposed to be doing to make sure that my role is successful? That's what you're trying to measure, right? You're trying to, end of the day, you say, well, how did I actually succeed? Did I do my job right? And I don't think you can get there unless you understand your employer or your senior employer or your consulting client, whatever their core metric is that they measure themselves on. What is their success, right? And that could be any number of things. So it might be if they're a for-profit consulting firm, they're measuring their success one way. Maybe it might be, are the partners happy with their bonus checks? A software unicorn, less concerned with profit, more with growth. So they're looking for reach, staff, brand. You publicly traded Fortune companies probably looking at bottom line and profitability. An NGO, I would hope, is not measuring based on profitability, but they're measuring on a number of patients served. They're measuring their success as a conglomerate or company or a nonprofit by one kind of defining metric. They typically have one they kind of roll up to. That's really important to them, and that's the exec team has defined that. That's their goal is to make sure if we do this one, if we do nothing else, if we do this, we're at least moving forward. And then supporting that, there's a lot under it. There's a lot of different supporting kind of key metrics that come up to it. But I call that one metric the emperor metric. That's the one that rules everything. If that's not positive, if that's not going in the right direction, it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. That's a real issue. And typically if that's not going forward, it's because other supporting metrics are not being managed properly, not hitting. It's all, it's a ladder it's a pyramid with one big point at the top, and that's the emperor. So the goal there, to me, it really is this first metric, this emperor metric, is critical. But the emperor needs support, and so I call these major supporting metrics. And I'm just staying within the royal family, Duke metrics. These are important. They matter. And the people in your role, you should find your Duke metric. What is the one metric that you can see? Well, if I just do this properly, hit this number correctly, then I know I've done my job to influence and support the emperor metric. That if I can complete this, it supports the bigger picture. Right. So you've got this there. So that was my sneak way of getting the one metric. It's the emperor metric. And it's true. It really is what I focus on. But along with it, you want to get to your own personal kind of one metric that rules kind of your day-to-day. And it's gonna come down to what your spot is. And this is where I started looking at that babble of types of metrics. It occurred to me that there's only a few here and there that'll apply to you in your job. If you're a sourcer, there's going to be one piece, a bundle. If you're working in brand, another. If you're a leader, there's another. And obviously, if you're a leader, you're supported by the other Duke metrics, but you shouldn't be down in the weeds constantly looking at everything. You have to trust your staff. It's everyone's got their own kind of core kind of group. An example might be, for lack of a better company name, I came up with Acme Wears My Hat. And so Acme Wears My Hat. They're a VC-backed cloud-based company. Their goal is to do cloud data storage and cloud enablement and compete with AWS. That's what they want to do. They want to get there. They're a startup. They're scaling rapidly. They're not focused on profits yet. They'll shift. That emperor metric, by the way, can shift based on where you are in your business cycle. So it may be that as you align and change, it shifts. But in this stage in their growth, they're not looking at profits. That's not the main and most important thing. They want to get there, and they know to get there. They need to establish a market presence, a client base, really their brand. They have to get tools built out. They have to really kind of start owning things and build a corner they can fight from. And that takes a lot of work, right? They're burning cash. They love the smell in the morning. They're on fire. They're moving. So again, their emperor metric, if you want to call it anything, is growth of market share. They want to capture more of the market. That's their emperor metric. And if they grow that every year, the exec team or every quarter over quarter, the exec team feels like they're succeeding, and they can go back to their investors and say, look, we're hitting the target we promised you would hit. It's getting more and more. Our emperor is growing. The emperor is happy. He's fed. So, and they'll get there a number of ways, but the key component there really is for them. And this example is hiring top performing cloud engineers at volume. That's really important to their growth. They're consulting with clients. They need people. They're building products. They need people. They need really good people because they are competing with a top tier company like Amazon and their small donor brand. They need significant brain power and work ethic in their people. So the CHRO, the CEO, CFO sat down. And they started measuring what that means, and they've quantified the impact of an A-level performer over a B-level performer, and the percent of market share that they can expect for every A versus B hire. So they think if they hire an A player, they're going to get X market share increase versus B will be Y market share increase, and Y is less than X in this instance. So they really want to focus on hiring the very best. It's critical to them. That this become the CHRO's Duke metric. The CHRO. How many candidates hire and retain quarter over quarter. That's their, at least in the short term, that's their main thing. It'll change as the business evolves. It'll change, but right now, their main piece is that Duke metric, right? So here's your job. Maybe it's not your real job, but for this example, you're in charge of the employment brand. Your goal is brand. That's your focus, and you have to figure out, and maybe you've never been a brand before. You've been a great recruiter, you've been a great sourcer, you like marketing, you got the job because you were in the right place, right time, you showed instincts, any number of reasons. But you're trying to figure out, well, how do I actually do this? How do I actually know that I'm succeeding? How do I make sure that I'm supporting the CHRO's metric? You can work that backwards, okay? So if you think about it, HR, they're duped by a quality hire retention metric. They have to show that the quarter over quarter, the percent of A players they hire and retain is increasing. That's their key thing. That's their main thing. So they need quality hires. They need to get the best possible people in the door and converted to hires. And to get there, they have to turn to their peers in recruiting, who they work closely with. And the recruiters are tasked with driving quality hires, right? I mean, this all seems fairly simple, but they have to drive quality hires, and that's a key thing. It's not just butts and seats; it's high quality. The metric there comes down to how many quality hires they convert from applicants. It's again fairly simple. That's what they're measuring. That's the main measure, and they do a pretty good job there. But their percent is good, but it could be better. And if the pool is limited, then the numbers don't tick up. So they need a deeper pool of candidates and applicants to talk to and screen and move through the process. So they turn to sourcing. Now, unlike a lot of startups, Acme Wears My Hat is smart about it. They have a sourcing team too. Smart. So the sourcing team's Duke metric is converting qualified candidates into qualified applicants. Basically they have to go out there and find people, or they apply and understand who's good and who's bad, and then flip them into candidates for recruiters to actually talk to, or at least applicants. And their data is showing they convert really well. They're good at this. They're tracking properly as far as the actual percents go of conversion. It's really good. The problem is they need more applicants, since again it's a percent of a small pool is still a small percent. Percent of a big pool, same percent, bigger number. So they want a bigger pool. It's important. It's a numbers game, right? All right. So guess what? Yeah. Your success here is going to come down to driving an uptick in response rates. That's how you drive sourcing success. That drives recruiting success, HR success, CHRO, and then the Emperor metric. So it all kind of pushes up and across and side by side. But I hope you're kind of following this linear progression. So your Duke, what's that? Well, you work out your Duke is going to be an increase in brand awareness. If that goes up, in theory, you'll get more responses, rates, and conversions. I mean, it's theory, but you've done some research, you've talked to peers in the industry, that makes sense to you, and the CHRO and team understand and they're happy with it. And just as a side note, by the way, that's what I call a Duke of many parts. In fact, all of these Dukes have multiple parts, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Some of you are probably thinking to yourself, I don't have one measure, I have 20. We'll talk about that in a minute. Just kind of table that for 1 second. But your main metric here is just brand awareness. So what it comes down to is just measuring increase and decrease in candidate response. If 6 months to a year out, the same percent of prospects are saying to your team when they do cold emails and cold calls, Acme, where's my hat? Never heard of you. And your unopened rates haven't changed, then you've got a problem. If there's been a lift, then you've impacted, you hope, likely positively, another one's Duke metric, sourcing. And that obviously goes to recruiting and up. And ultimately, CHRO is standing in front of the board explaining how their brilliant work has resulted in increased market share. And if you're lucky, we can dream about this, they may even mention that's all happened because their brand is so strong. Yeah, we can dream, right? Or if you're in sourcing, they can mention the sourcing strategy team is so good. But it's if you think about the whole kind of progress, it's just you focus on one key metric that's core to your job, and how it actually touches your colleagues' core metric and their core metric, and how you can all kind of lift each other. And what I just described was very sort of linear, top down. I'm aware it's rarely like that. It's typically side by side, concurrent. You're working together, pushing each other back and forth. But the goal is to get to the point where you actually have that sort of synergy of metrics, and the Russian dolls. Yeah, this for me is the details, right? And that's important. If the fellow on your left is your Duke, then everyone on the right is contained within that Duke metric, and they are all their own metrics and their own pieces. They're all supported, right? So. Yeah, think about it this way. You have your supporters. You have. I'm going to stay with this royal analogy because why not? I think I've been watching too many Game of Thrones repeats, getting ready for the new season coming up. I think, but so you've got your knights, your serfs, maybe some jugglers, and if you're lucky, Tyrion Lannister to advise you, etc. And these are your core metrics. They belong to you. They support your main point, your Duke. And it's frankly why there are so bloody many of them in that word cloud. We keep adding new ones in and calling them all recruiting metrics, which is kind of absurd. They all belong within certain subsets supporting certain key metrics. They are support metrics, and they're important. And if you have to measure them and it makes sense, you go in, you dig in, but you also need to know when to cut off and say, okay, that's enough. I know if I do these 5 things properly, then my main metric will tick forward. And if you notice that certain things you're measuring don't make sense, you dump them. You just make sure you're focusing on your core and supporting with the right measurements and the right activities. I mean, the reality is, if you're a brand person, you're not going to measure time to start that closely. You don't need to measure that at a metric level yourself. Time to start is important. It's interesting. It may help the company overall, and I think it does. But for your job and your Duke metric, it doesn't really support it. It's interesting, but something that one of your colleagues is measuring, you hope, and if you're curious about it, you can ask them. Yeah, on the flip side, your onboarding team, they're probably really interested in time in the time to start metric, but they're not really as interested, or at least they're not for their Duke metric interested in landing page conversions. Whereas for you, that's really important. That's something you're going to want to measure because it supports your brand awareness piece. So once you've got that Duke worked out, you understand what to measure and support, what areas, what levers that can help move your mission forward and or guide you from straying in the wrong direction. You focus there, you care about those, and you measure those, and you maintain that measurement, and again adjust as needed if you find things aren't working out. And your peers, if they're doing their job right, are doing the same thing in their focus areas. Many of them are at best, just of interest to you. But what should matter to you again is that Duke. Is the Duke working? And if not, Yeah, why not? So again, if you're HR, acting, where's my hat? You understand the chain of events enough to know that if your friend in brand is getting increased brand awareness, that should mean the number of quality employees is going up, and you're happy with that. So you're happy with your brand person because you believe they're doing their job the right way. If we could jump to the next slide, Alexis. Thank you. So like I said, Duke of many parts, and this before the screaming starts. Totally understand there are different functions within recruiting beyond this. These are sort of 4 core ones I grabbed as examples. And I wanted to grab what I think are sort of 3 really important metrics per function. You can disagree. You may be right about disagreeing with this. It's fine, but I want to show you what I think if I'm measuring in these roles as a leader, what I think my team should be measuring, and when I've been in certain of these roles, what I've measured. So in sourcing, I mean, submittal to interview ratio to me seems really important. You want to make sure that you're submitting the right number of applicants to your peer in recruiting, that they're accepting them. Otherwise, you're submitting junk, and that impacts your large metric. Applicants per opening. That's going to inform, frankly, that's going to inform your total number of applicants you can actually look through and peel through. And that, by the way, is a metric that you're measuring on. But you may want to talk to brand about. Say, listen, brand, can you measure this for me too? Help me with this. Again, there's a lot of crossover that happens. This is a touch point with brand. Candidates added to pipeline. Again, that's your sourcing. That's your pool. You're building your own pool up. You may also be adding folks in from talent pools that brands powering and landing pages. So again, there's synergies. There's synergy across all of this. Brand marketing. They're measuring. I think they should be measuring engagement with the brand, and there are ways of doing this. And under engagement, by the way, there are sub metrics you can measure too. You can look at. You can look at social. You can look at shares on Facebook and on LinkedIn and comments. You can, if you have the right technology in place in your career site, you can measure time in the career site. Where do they go? What white papers are they downloading? What are they doing on the site? That's engagement. There's a lot around that too. And if you aren't doing those things, it's worth thinking about doing them because they're important. Your open rates. If you're doing email campaigning, you can pretty easily, as long as you have even basic tools, and hopefully you have something in place for this, you can measure your email open rates. So when you're doing messaging, you can understand if the message is working or not, and test and retest. But again, that's going to give these give you lift to your Duke metric. And then so I think source of hire and quality and source of quality applicants, those are really important metrics to me. And part of that's informed by my background, where I always believed in marketing, in lead gen, in consumer advertising for recruiting. That's been sort of my thing, and that's part of why I joined HireClicks. But you want to measure where your hire is coming from, and that does a couple things for you. First, it shows you kind of where they live, and you can then go to sourcing and say, listen, we're getting a lot of hires coming in from Stack Overflow, Mr. Sourcer. You may want to go get an account there and start talking to people in that pool because they're applying. So it sounds like their ears are open for a conversation. So you can help out internally with that. But also in terms of measuring your budget, understanding your spend, your burn rate, those are critical. And you can measure every dollar you spend at this point, and you should measure every dollar you spend in advertising. And that's for hires. A source of quality hire as a subset, those are the folks who made it almost a hire but didn't quite get in. And it may be that your source of hire is typically Indeed, but you get a lot of quality hires from Glassdoor or vice versa. So make sure you measure both because they both matter. And quality hires it means they're engaged with the brand. They like you. They're silver medalists. You can keep them warm, but also it says put more ads in this spot because you're getting people from here. Even if you're not getting hires from here yet, there's definitely something happening there. Be aware of this too. So sorts of higher quality hire applicants I think are important in brand. If you're a recruiter, and I say recruiting, don't take it the wrong way, but this is all kind of recruiting. But if you're recruiting, you're in the recruiting team, and you're working with sourcing, working with brand. I think you want to measure on an interview to hire. How many people do you actually submit for interviews to get hired? If it's 10 folks you submit and they get interviewed and there's no hires, you're wasting a lot of people's time, or you're trying to get butts and seats. If it's 1-to-1. That's not always a great metric either. It sounds like you're a sharpshooter, and maybe you are. Or maybe you're supplying so few candidates that they're desperate to hire, or they're growing so fast they're hiring anybody. You want to understand a bit behind that metric. Like, is it just because I'm so good, or is it because because I'm so bad, or is it because the hiring managers are terrible? And we need to fix that piece of it too. But that can tell you a story. That we have to look at it from a couple of directions. Offer acceptance rate. if you're getting offers booted left and right, it's a high percent. That may come down to a couple factors, but you have to dig in there. That could be that you're not pre-qualifying on salary, location, pieces that really kind of fall in your hands and are kind of block and tackle stuff, or it could be that your offers are always too low, and you know this because you can't tell you this. Well, now you have data behind it. You can go to your finance team and say, listen, we're making these offers and they're lower than everyone else out there. I've benchmarked against the competition, so I've grabbed a metric from there. I've grabbed some candidate survey data from folks who turned the offer down. I've got a bit there, but I've got this actual number here, this rate, and look what's happening. It's trending down. As these things trend up, as our competitors are offering more money, and we're offering the same, it's actually going down, and you can predict the future based on that metric, and it likely will freak them out. It can be very useful, and the quality of.
Something really quick, Mark. We have a couple questions that came in that actually are tying in really with some of this, some of the do many parts. A lot of people pinging us about specific software that maybe you could share. You hit this slide right here, and a bunch of people went, "Oh, me, this." So some software. A lot of people are looking for that, and then if you could maybe kind of mix that in with some examples of that would really be helpful for some of the people because, like I said, we jumped into this slide and everybody went, "Oh, stop!" So just some expertise on some software and some great examples.
Yeah, so it's a great question too. And I want to think about the answer for a couple seconds, and I'll explain why. Right now, the software landscape in recruiting is, for lack of a better term, messy. There are a lot of solutions coming out there. There's a lot of VC money coming into the industry for the last couple of years. Frankly, it's been crazy. TA is the most funded sector of HR technology and has been for about 2 years now, and that's caused a growth of all kinds of tools, which is great. And I like seeing more options, but the reality is a lot of them don't quite do what you want, or they're point solutions. So I'm hesitant to recommend certain specific vendors because I need to understand how you're going to use the tool. That's my first caveat, because while we have a lot of solutions out there, there's a lot of unique situations. You could be a small scaling startup, you could be a massive multinational energy company, you could be a restaurant chain, and you're going to need different pieces. But what I recommend, and it's interesting that people are asking this question because it gets asked a lot. Because people want to know what tool should I buy, and they want just tell me what to buy, I'll buy it, and I'm all set, and I can walk away. I get the instinct. I've been there myself too. I'll give you this answer. I think at the core, and at the core, you need a couple things to really track well and measure, and it's going to come down, frankly, to what you touch in your role. So if you're doing sourcing, you want a really strong CRM. You want some way where you can really kind of pool and track and measure in there. And there's some good ones out there. If I list 3 or 4 of them off, numbers 5 and 6, who I also love, are going to call them and yell at me. So I'm not going to give specific names. If you want to talk offline about this, absolutely, I'm happy to talk about it and sort of share my opinions. I just don't want to piss off friends, if that makes sense. And tools I think are really great because I forgot to mention it. But there are some great strong CRMs out there. Some of them are geared toward, again, large multinationals. Some are geared toward mid-sized companies. It's comes down to who you are. And if you reach out to me with an email, it's Martin at HireClicks.com. Will get to me, Martin at HireClicks.com, and kind of give me your situation. I'm happy to give you some suggestions. I really am. But I don't want to go full boat into all of the, here's what you should buy tomorrow, here's your shopping list, because I'll probably give you wrong suggestions because I don't know your situations personally. But that said, if you're doing sourcing and you want to keep track of what you're doing, I mean, Excel is a stopgap. You need a CRM. You need a CRM with good reporting on the back end. And by the way, I'll say this again. Whenever possible, buy a tool with good reporting. Ask to see the reporting during the demo. Make sure you understand how the reports look, how they're generated, what they're based on. Can you customize them, or are they out of the box? What's the cost if you want to customize them after you buy it? Because that can be a hidden cost. So if you can get built-in analytics and their quality analytics in the tool, worth doing. If you can't, there are some good packages out there you can buy for analytics and tracking that you can lay on top of your tech ecosystem, but if possible, kind of get it built in if you can. So a good CRM for sourcing is important. If you're on the brand side, CRMs can help you out obviously quite a bit, but you do want more of a marketing automation tool. Some kind of recruit marketing platform is really helpful. Some have CRMs, some don't. Most have CRMs. Some of them, the CRMs are really great. Some are very light because that's not their focus area, but a really strong recruit marketing platform is super useful. And again, make sure look at the analytics, look at the reporting. I can't say that strongly enough. Make sure when you're doing your demos and you're buying the software, look at the reporting. Look at the reports. How are they generated? How are they read? Think about the people you're sending them out to. So if your tool generates a 5-page report that's basically in a Excel spreadsheet kind of throw up, for lack of a better term, that's not going to fly well with a lot of your executives. They want a simple dashboard. So make sure with the visualization is really important too. That they can see really quickly what you're doing. Think pie charts. 4 or 5 and some bar graphs, and your C-levels will love that because they don't have time to go through your full data sheet. The other option is it pushes out data to you, and you do your analysis, and then you translate it then to your dashboard. But if it's pre-built and can be done by the tool and save you some steps, I think worth the investment. The ad hoc thing's important too. No two companies are the same. No two CFOs are you going to ask you for the exact same reporting job to job. I guarantee it. There always some little thing they want to see, and invariably it's not part of the custom-built reporting. I'm sorry, the built-in reporting from the vendor. So make sure you can do some custom reporting and ad hoc reporting. And if you can, assuming you can, ask them what the cost there is. Is it 10 custom reports you can do, or is there a charge per, or is 10 plus charges, or is it unlimited? What is it? Make sure you ask them that question, because that can be kind of a hidden cost that comes in afterwards. And I do think that being able to build your reports and based on your insights and what you'd find as your metric is going to help you a lot. So you want that freedom. You want that flexibility. I haven't forgotten about the recruiters. I mean, sourcing is going to live in the CRM. Marketing will live more in the marketing platform and in the CRM bit too, obviously. If you're more on the recruiting side, you're living more in the ATS, and there may be some groans in there, but it's true because you're in there. You're in there when they become candidates and applicants rather than the candidates. That's when you're really working with them. So you're in the ATS, and you have two options there. I think either you're going to work in the ATS and generate reports from there, or you're going to work in the actual CRM a little bit for reporting, but mostly in the ATS. So if you have bad reporting from your ATS, but you have a good CRM and they integrate well, then you can pull reports from the CRM and go that direction. But at a minimum, strong marketing platform. Hopefully powers your career site because you can measure a lot as a brand person from engagement on your career site. Good CRM. Good ATS, and then outside of that, there are lots of other great tools that you want to pull into your ecosystem, but they're not kind of core that we're talking about today. I mean, there's great referral technology out there. There's great events technology. You want to have good reporting from your CRM, especially, and if you can from your marketing platform and from your ATS. But if you can from the kind of top and the bottom of that stack, make sure they talk to the CRM really well, and the CRM can generate your reports. And I hope that helped.
Yeah, and I do want to remind everybody again that another really great resource would be one of our sponsors, Clear Company. So please go check them out because that's a great place to start to get all of this stuff kind of lined up for you as far as everything you need from applicant tracking and performance management and all of the metrics that you're going to need in there. So again, just a little tie back and a name drop.
I can't do that.
See how I did that right there? Yeah. All right. Okay.
I appreciate it. So. And again, I mean, I'm happy to answer questions. Oh, by the way, this is actually a good time to mention this too. If you're not part of the Facebook group Talent Product Plays, it's Talent Product Plays with an S, Plays. Join it right away. It's a group that I set up with George Larock a couple of years ago. It's made up of 1,400 members right now, all vetted. We're all in the recruiting space. We're all curious about products. So we make them, we use them, we analyze them, or remarket them, or something in there, and I mean, you're going to get lots of data, information, and tools from that site. In fact, the thing I just mentioned about the ecosystem, that was triggered by a question someone else asked recently on the site that I'm sort of riffing off of. So a great place to go to for knowledge. And if you want to figure tools out and talk to your peers and just kind of get a handle around this stuff, it's got some great folks in there. Highly recommended. just request to join the group, and I'll pop you right in. Be good to have you in there. But again, you can do this kind of research there too. And I'm also an open book. Email me. You can get to me. I do want to go to one last piece that's going to piss probably a couple people off, and that's how much I really don't like these two metrics when it comes to recruiting. And these are the two classic metrics, by the way. This is time to fill and cost per hire. And time to fill, I think, is one of the worst metrics to track because it is so. A, it's really arbitrary. B, it's very, very rarely tracked the right way. So if your company's time to fill is an average of 95 days, that sounds terrible. But maybe that's because you hire cloud architects who know Swahili on a regular basis, and that throws off your curve because the rest of the people you're hiring are doing call center. You hire them within 10 days, and that's a great number. But you're doing a lump average, which is typical. The second thing is too, you can never do evergreen jobs. You can't have a job open in your career site because that kills your metrics. It also just it's a false yardstick that either will freak people out or make them feel safe. So I recommend if you're doing time to fill, you focus on role by role and frankly country by country. If you're global and you're doing a global time to fill, that makes no sense. Because time to fill rates in, say, the Netherlands versus the States are radically different because it just takes a lot longer to hire in the Netherlands than the States, even longer in France and Germany. So you're killing yourself with that number. It's never really accurate. So if you're going to use time to fill, drill down to not just the role, but the location. And you can say, well, our time to fill salespeople in the Netherlands is this number. In the States, it's this. Software engineers in Canada is this, because they're all different. And even within software, that lumps software engineers. I mean, an architect versus an SQA person is going to be a different number of days. It just is. So I don't like time to fill because it gets abused so often, and it really measures where it's impactful. It's measuring at the wrong part of the overall kind of globe. And then cost per hire. That's a terrible metric. No one measured the same. Some companies will include their recruiter salaries, some don't. Some include their salaries and their benefits, others don't. Some include their tools and they divide their tool cost across everything. Some just include their interview cost. It costs X amount to fly this person out. And some other people include their hiring managers' hours spent. I mean, it's never consistent, which is a problem. The second thing is that you're handing your finance team a stick to beat you with. So let's say that you've been growing at 5% per year the last couple of years, and you think your cost per hire is I don't know, because I'm describing a number because it's easy, $1,000 per hire, and that's not accurate, but $1,000 per hire, that's what your number is. And your boss comes to you and says, okay, great job last few years. Now we're looking to grow and we're becoming a software company. We realize that we're actually not a manufacturing company. We need a lot of engineers and architects. So we want to hire 1,000 folks in the IT space over the next 6 months, and that's really your main goal. And everything else is kind of on hold, but you got to hire these engineers. They say, great, so I'm going to need some budget for that. They say, well, your cost per hire is $1,000, so it's 1,000 times 1,000. Here's your budget. Here's $1 million. And the problem is, engineers cost a lot more to hire than folks in manufacturing typically. So your costs are off. All of a sudden, you're under budget because they're looking backwards. They're looking at your past performance and saying, well, if it's this, it's always going to be this. And all of a sudden, you're in a very complicated conversation with people who don't understand recruiting that well around why you need to increase the budget per hire. And if you had metrics to back you up around what engineers cost to hire, because you've been measuring this in your past, it would be helpful, but you don't have that metric because you haven't done it before. So now you're benchmarking from other companies, you're doing research, all to convince somebody internally that they have to get past a certain number. And the reality is, and we're all in the recruiting space, if you tell, and here's the analogy, if you tell a candidate the salary range is $90,000 to $100,000 per year, they're going to hear the $100,000 per year. And they're going to stay there. It's hard to walk them off that number, which is why I was trained early on. If you give a range, make sure it's qualified and they understand what it implies and level, et cetera. If you just give a raw number, they're going to think if they don't get that offer, they might boot the offer. Same with finance. If you tell them here's our cost per hire, that's your cost per hire for the next 5,000 years, and it'll be really careful with that number. I'd rather you talked about your overall. Here's what it costs us to hire this number of people the past year, and divide it down by for this role it was this. And if you can get that finite, that's helpful. But one cost per hire to rule them all is never a good move in my mind. So avoid those dragons. You're welcome to email me and yell at me for not agreeing with you if you love those two. I just think they're very dangerous. So beyond that, I mean, I've talked a lot about metrics, measuring things, Dukes, Emperors, and the Lannisters. I'm kind of wrapping up here. If you have questions, shoot them up now. I know we're kind of coming up on 45 minutes, which is kind of long for a webinar, I think. If you have questions beyond this, as I said, email me and or join Channel Product Plays. And if you find me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter, whatever you want to do, stalk me on Facebook. It's all good.
And is it that Facebook, what is it? It's Talent Product Plays, like you play a video game?
Yeah, I came up with it a few years ago, and I kind of regret the name, but it's stuck. It's for talent products, like talent recruiting products, and then plays, as in plays. It was meant to be like wow, I'm saying play on word. It's a play, and there's even a pun in there. It's play on words, and that it's plays as attempts, as well as we're all kind of playing in this space together. I don't know. I was like midnight when I came up with it.
Awesome. And then there were just a couple questions. Let me throw one at you. Somebody was asking if maybe you could go in a little bit deeper between your story you were telling between A-level players and B-level players and how those are measured.
Well, so you mean in terms of like with the measure of A versus B? I was just no, I can't. Frankly, I was coming with an analogy. I didn't really. I mean, if you want to, I mean, I can talk a bit about that, I guess, as I think about it. I mean, A versus B. It's going to depend on who's doing the hiring, what they look for. So if you think that somebody who can walk in the door day one and deliver brilliance in technology and really elevate your tech stack and leaves within 6 months is an A player because you don't really care about longevity, you want them to come and make an impact, that's your A player. If you think I want someone who can come in and learn the company, the culture, and slowly build up and have an influence and be here for years and years and years, build historical knowledge, that's your A player. They're different people. So it's, I mean, to me, if you want to, what I think is an A player personally, when I'm hiring, I look for curiosity. I look for creativity. I look for a certain level of drive. I look for a willingness to do things beyond your comfort zone. I look for hobbies, frankly. I look for people who are always trying to do new things and experiment. That to me is an A player. They're always interested in trying new things. They're not afraid of failing, but they also don't have a history of failing. It's not like they fail at everything. They just they can learn from it. I look for that. I look for people who can function well in a team. There aren't jerks, frankly, and kind of can make the whole stronger. That to me is someone's an A player. They're not full of themselves. They're not kind of walking in with a big ego and a big name and a lot of acronyms after their name saying, here's who I am, MBA, JD, yada, yada, yada. They're coming in to do things that they love. That's who I look for.
Awesome. Well, I think that was a pretty positive way to end things. We'll go ahead and wrap it up there. I do want to thank everybody that attended today and asked questions, and the ones that didn't get answered, like I said, we'll definitely make sure we get out to everybody.
Yeah, pass them along.
Yeah, totally. We'll pass them along to Martin, so don't worry. And again, thank you to our sponsors for making everything possible today. We really appreciate you guys being here. And like I said earlier, if you want, head on over to our website, recruitingwebinars.com, and check out Thursdays. Sign up, and we'll see you then. Other than that, have a great afternoon, and I hope you all have a great day. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. I enjoyed this.